Just when you thought it was safe to go back into the multiplex, Insidious returns to haunt your waking dreams. This time out, writer and producer Leigh Whannell gets behind the camera for the first time to journey ever deeper into the further. RTÉ TEN met Leigh in London, and I started by asking him what lies in the further for Leigh Whannell himself.
God, I think, for me it'd be all my worst fears, whether they're tangible physical things like spiders or the deepest ocean, or even just people to me it's a place that's filled with everything that taps into your own, it sort of molds itself around you. So depending on the individual that goes in there, it'll change and shift. You'll see people from your own life. It could be somebody who threatened you when you were a kid might suddenly appear there. I feel like it's a living, breathing thing, the further, that kind of taps into the unconscious of whoever walks into it,
In Insidious 3, you really couldn't leave Lynn Shay as, Ellis Rayner, the great psychic, alone. You just couldn't let her go, could you? Yeah, no, I mean,
I realised that we'd given the Lambert family enough of a beating over the course of 2 movies. They'd been through the ringer, and so I felt like we should move on and create a new family, but I still wanted this film to be connected to the other movies. And Elise is just such a natural choice to play the lead. I mean, she was such a strong character in the first 2 movies that making her the central figure of this movie seemed like a really, natural way to go.
All of them can hear you.
She's such a effervescent person, she's so full of life. It's kind of exhausting, she makes you realize, that you're not running on enough batteries, She just has so much energy and such a life force. So when we did Insidious, we thought it'd be great to have her play the medium, because we've seen psychics and mediums in so many movies, and they're usually these dour people who come in, and we wanted the opposite of that. We wanted somebody who was very relatable, who could be a neighbour, and Lynn did a great job of that, and that's what I love about her character. What makes her unique is that she's like this happy-go-lucky person who just happens to have this, superpower, essentially.
I'll be waiting in the dark when the pain finally kills you.
Since this franchise, or this trilogy came about, the Insidious trilogy came about, horror movies have got more sophisticated under your influence, as well as with It Follows and The Babadook. Is it getting harder and harder to scare a more sophisticated audience?
I think it is. I think audiences have been subconsciously trained to expect certain tropes and traditions of horror films, and they still might get a little bump and involuntarily scare, but I don't necessarily think that's satisfying for them. I think if you really want to scare people today, you have to go deeper than just a jump scare. And that's what I really tried with Insidious Chapter 3, to kind of delve into the dread of what it would be like to have this spirit attaching itself to you and not trying to possess you, but trying to take you into its world, trying to kill you. We've seen a lot of ghost movies, but there's not too many where the ghost is actively trying to kill you, murder you in the real world. And so I loved tapping into that, and hopefully, audiences get a few jumps from this film, but they're also scared on a pretty deep level as well.
I mentioned Stephanie Scott earlier on as Quinn Brenner, who was her troubled teen in this movie. Mm-hmm. But from the turn of the screw by Henry James to Regan in The Exorcist, it's always kids.
Yeah.
Why are they always the most haunted? Is it because they're vulnerable and innocent, do you think?
I think so. I think kids have a certain vulnerability, and they also don't question things the way adults do. They're not skeptics. They take things for granted. If they see a demon behind the curtain, they just say, hey, that's a demon behind the curtain. Whereas an adult would look for the rational explanation. So I think there's that. And I also think it's kind of traumatizing to see kids in trouble, in jeopardy. We want to protect children. They're the most, vulnerable members of society. I just had a daughter myself a couple of years ago, and it's hard for me to watch now scenes where children are in jeopardy more than it ever was. And so I just think, and there's also an innocence, I think, to younger people that it's easier to smash that innocence apart with a demonic entity. With an adult, there's a lot of baggage that comes with it,
Finally, and very quickly, Leigh, is this a new golden age of horror, do you think?
It's hard to say. Oftentimes you don't realise you're in a golden age until later. It's more in hindsight that you realise, oh wow, we were having a real golden age. I hope so though, and I hope the best is yet to come. I hope the next couple of years introduce us to a whole bunch of new horror filmmakers.
Leigh, thanks for talking to us.
Thank you for having me.
Cheers.